Good morning, and today I want to share my viewpoints upon the regeneration of the Indian culture by the willful occupation by the foreign and British company, the kind of a Thibis company which came here for the agenda of capturing and demoralizing the Indian culture. If we see just after the demise of the great emperor Aurangzeb and the succession of the weaklings on the throne created a kind of vacuum there, and the internecine warfare started to initiate amongst the stately states, among the regional states, and where complete disharmony started to prevail in the whole Indian subcontinent. If we see that in northward portion, the rise of the Sikhs, in the southward, the Marathas and other states like Bengal under Musid Quli Jafar Khan, and Hyderabad Nizam under Chin Khalis Khan, Awadh under Sujauddaulah Khan, and in Principality of Delhi just ascend to the area Ruhelkhand under Hafiz Rahmat Khan and other Ruhela Bangas Pathans. The kind of the central monitoring which started to weaken due to the lack of the leadership under the successor of the great emperor Aurangzeb, who built the empire with so diligent way that he fought several battles at the age of 88 and 89, and the last stage of his life passed in complete warfare to maintain the Mughal state. But definitely after his death, he started to shatter in a way that it was built on a house of cards. The definite circumstances of the state was decaying under the leadership of his own successors, who were not the willful commanders to fight the new rising circumstances in the hardy atmosphere. And when the Indian powers started to fight amongst each other, and they started to disintegrate the great fabric of the Mughal Sultanate, which was so diligently built by great Emperor Akbar and later on Aurangzeb. And the circumstances started to antithetical to the Mughal state when the state machinery degraded into the attitudes of nepotism, and the weaklings of Aurangzeb started to sell out the most important post and appointed several non-competent on the throne of governorship, and the kind of conspiracies and counter-conspiracies which prevailed in the court of the Mughal, which was once startling and dazzling in affairs and delivering justice. And that justice started to fail out when we see that the weaklings started to rule from the great Mughal empire from the central point of Delhi. And just it was a kind of revamp of the regional states under the able leadership of the commanders who were exhausted in Mughal court by the conspiracies and counter-conspiracies. And midway we see the attack of the dacoit Nadir Shah of Iran, who defeated the Mughal emperor or Mughal empire in the Battle of Karnal on 24th of March 1739, and the kind of the defeat which the Mughal empire sustained was a kind of the certain demise which we see at the hand of the successors of Aurangzeb. And the conspiracies and counter-conspiracies played the full role, and later on we see the Ahmad Shah Abdali from Afghanistan started to attack the sovereign Mughal empire several times and defeated and devastated the empire, and several wounds were incurred on the empire. And the savior of empire, the status of the savior of empire was taken by Marathas by entering into the treaties with the small potentates of the court, and they entered into as the kingmaker or the savior of the kingdom of the Mughals, on whom the empire once cracked down and completely butchered the Prince Sambhaji under Aurangzeb, and thus the kind of the stately strength degenerated and went into limbo in oblivion. In this way, we see that the economical power of the country was still very robust, and the trade was also in favor of the state. The regional state which arose by the grace of the charismatic personality of the stately princess maintained the economic power of the state, just like in Bengal under Murshid Quli Khan, and in Hyderabad, Nizam of Hyderabad, and in Marathas under Peshwas, and the establishment of several companies on the coastlines like the French, English, Dutch, Danish, Austrians, and others who wanted to trade with Indian subcontinent and entered into several treaties and counter treaties to safeguard their interests. But as we see in European situation, there was ongoing warfare amongst these states or the nation states in Europe, and so the replica of that warfare was found even in Indian subcontinent, and they entered into the warfare. The warfare in companies was to safeguard their interest and to face out the other companies. When the rulers of India became weak, they could not stop the conspiracies hatched by these companies, and due to this, the kind of intervention ceased, and the companies started to recruit the locals into their sepoys and started to fight. And in these circumstances, the French were the first to recruit a large number of the Indian sepoys and resisted the British, and almost under the leadership of Dupleix, by signing the treaty with Nizam of Hyderabad, they captured the British territory, even defied the Indian authority. And we see the Battle of Adyar under Mahfuz Khan was defeated by the British, defeated by the French, and a kind of the victory of the European mode of warfare on the Indian and Oriental warfare created in historical happenings which later on impacted on Indian history, and the kind of the understanding which prevailed previously to this war was that the Indian army was invincible, was broken, and a handful of the Europeans defeated the Indian army so large in number, and they did what they willed, and the company which came here to trade with and their sole matter was trading started to reign in political sphere, and they made the Nizamate of Hyderabad what they willed, and even in Travancore area, Dupleix was given the Jagir, and Dupleix was nothing short. Dupleix was not the representative of the government; it was the representative of the world, and it may be the different case that it was the government initiative, but legally it was the company which was here trading. And so in the sense of British, it was even not the government company, it was founded by the private people and to trade with India to earn more and more profit. When the interest was threatened, the British wanted to safeguard their interest as the princely states were not in power to counter the power of the French. So they again started to intermingle themselves into the affairs of the state. And when they entered into the interference of the courtly states, the conspirators of the Indian subcontinent, and the complete debauched nature of the British started to play the game. And thus we see the rise of Robert Clive, who was the gambler, thieves, and full of immoral activity holders, and a definite failure in the part of the company when he started to suicide himself, but that person became victorious against the Indian army and Indian states. And it was Robert Clive who defeated the Nawab of Bengal, consolidated the power of the British at Fort William, completely dethroned Siraj-ud-Dowlah, and later on killed. And later on he also defeated the French in the south and captured several territories. And as we see in historical happenings that the French were forced to leave the country on political sphere, and it was the company of the English established by the merchant, not by the state, that they started to control the territory of Indian subcontinent, especially in Bengal, in South India, in Hyderabad and Karnataka. And later on we see that their interference in Mumbai presidency also started to increase when Raghava Dada or Raghava sold the sovereignty of the Marathas into their hands. This company fought several wars, especially the Battle of Plassey, later on with Awadh, and even the Emperor of India, Battle of Buxar, and in south, at Battle of Arcot, and capture of Travancore, Devikottai, and if we prolong the historical span, we find that this company also fought several battles against Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan later on. And we see that the company was not the government initiative, it was not composed of the British military strength, it was not composed of the will of the Parliament of Britain, while it was only trading company having charter from the great Queen Elizabeth, and thus this kind of company started to recruit the forces. The legal question whether it was valid or not is later on decided by Imperial Parliament of Britain, and it was the company which used all tools of maneuver like giving bribe to the leisure demand of the fraudsters prevalent in company affair. And when Robert Clive signed instead of Watson on the red paper, and before the Battle of Plassey, and just before the eyes of Omid Chand, and defeated the people of Bengal and captured the whole affair of Bengal, remaining in loop line, and maintained the dual system in the state. And later on we see that the kind of impoverishment of the state took place. It was not due to the affairs of the state, but was due to the aquatic nature of the company, which was not legally built. The legal charter was having to trade with Indian subcontinent and to maintain relationship economically and on trade lines only. But we see that they occupied the territory, they fought the war, they captured and killed the princess, and illegally occupied the Indian subcontinent. Several battles were fought amongst the Nawab of Bengal, Nizam of Hyderabad, and Nawab of Karnataka, and Polygars, battle with the Marathas, and capture of the Maratha domain later on. And up to 1856, when company was in force, it was doing the illegal activity on the lines of international law. The charter was not given to fight the war. If in war or battle company was defeated, who was to sign the treaty? Was the imperial crown of Britain responsible for the battles or war initiated by the company? I don't think it is so. But unfortunate Indian people whose rulers were not competent and were internationally engaged in doing conspiracies against each other, defeated by a complete awkwardly made company full of the thieves and unwanted morality of the company holders. And Indian people, the great Indian people, were defeated by the Chor Uchakka company of Britain, which was made only for the trading activities. But it was the unfortunate circumstances that the Indian leaders could not understand the real nature and the real importance of the subcontinent. If you see, India was the center of trade. It was flourishing country, having own system of education where great scholars were emanated, and a kind of reputation which it always held under the canopy of its learning and maintained the status of Jagat Guru. But the onset of this devout company, the plundering company, Indian subcontinent started to be looted. And what we see today in 21st century India, the kind of poverty and backwardness was caused by that company's rule, is later on transformed into the British in the hands of the British Crown illegally. British Crown was not legal in handing over the power from the company, as it never occupied by using its own force, and it was not legal or justified in controlling the affairs of the state, which was illegally occupied by the company beyond the orders from the charter given by the Queen Elizabeth. So the civilized society and civilized atmosphere, as they claim today, gone into limbo and oblivion when the mindset of the loot started to come in offing. And we see that the circumstantial evidences say that the Indian people were completely demoralized and drifted by a small company, and the British Empire was expanded into Indian subcontinent. All types of ills and the problems which we see today, like the backwardness in education and backwardness in economy and hostile neighbor and standing up of the kind of lagging in behind in technological affair was also the direct legacy of the British rule, especially the company which completely demoralized the Indian people by attacking on the state, by attacking on culture, by uprooting the whole uh, status of Vishwaguru, which it maintained for 5,000 years. India was never so humiliated, so dilapidated, so looted as the company did in the vast time span of around 100 years. And later on, 100 years of the English or the British rule also demoralized as they maintained the policy of divide and rule. And they wanted to keep India as their subordinate, and they did, and they used every leisure demand to control the affair of the state by dividing the Indian people into caste, creed, and community. And they passed the legislation that was full of the divisive attitudes and leanings in the internal texture. And we see that they passed the communal award later on, and they divided Hindus and Muslims apart, and all types of communal feeling, internal strife, internal discord were fostered by the British. It was the illegal rule of the company and illegal rule of the British crown, which was not so much potent to capture and hold the Indian subcontinent. If you see the population of the subcontinent, it was around 30 crores by Britain. Even today in 21st century, it's not more than 3 to 4 crore. And this was the definite or dismal failure in the part of the Indian subcontinent and resident of Indian subcontinent that they became slave to so small a nation on which they cannot even adjust their whole population. If all people of India march to Great Britain, the place is not enough to hold them. Even all the people there can be subsumed into the small state of the Indian subcontinent, and that very small nation maintained the political hold of India for more than 200 years. It is also a joke. And the new rising population and the people of India should read again and again how were they so much devastated and controlled by the people of so small a nation? What were the reasons? If we are going to forget the kind of the history which the company built here, we definitely be in kind of delirium in historical sense. So we have to understand and to maintain our knowledge on this texture, and we have to understand what we should do. And modern India is full of several problems which were created by the company or the British rule. So I think for the student of general knowledge in history and even of other streams should ponder over again and again on these circumstances. Thank you. I think the topic, the impact of the British rule or the occupation of land by the company, the quiet company, it is enough for the introductory speech. And thanks a lot to all of you who are watching and listening to my lecture. Thanks a lot again. Thank you. Namaskar.